when it comes to risk management, we first need to understand the level of risk an organization must handle in order to function normally and avoid any business disruption. So, anytime we start talking about risk appetite, like we're going to do in this video, we're going to cover what risk appetite looks like. We'll look at some functional risk tolerances, risk capacity, and we've got some examples here that we're going to talk around the likelihood, the impact, and obviously risk rating and how we do that information security. So, let's first jump into risk appetite. So, risk appetite is basically the understanding of how much risk an organization is willing to accept. So that's the first thing. So how much risk will accept, right? And this could be good, could be bad, and we'll cover this in just a moment as well. So how much is okay? And we have obviously our risk rating criteria where it might be something like this, where level 0, we've got level 1, level 2, level 3, level 5, and we've got things like maybe a 5 is critical, maybe we've got our high, we've got our medium, have our low, and maybe non-functional could be something that's a very low level type of risk. And then on that scale, well, we can define what our threshold could be. Maybe our we're willing to accept maybe anything up, you know, that's our maybe our risk tolerance is anything above or below medium is our risk tolerance, and then we're going to have our threshold, which could be anything above a medium, and so on. So that way we can sort of manage where we sort of support and how we're going to handle our risk. So the question that I have is, well, are we meant to, let's just say that we've got our risk management team, we may have the board, say B for board, we may have certain business units. Are we meant to keep going back to these people, these departments, anytime the risk is present? And there's two parts to that answer. One is in most scenarios, you may have to because there's certain areas and if there's complexity involved and how much that complexity looks like and the time and the costs associated with those risks, sometimes we would. Other times we'll have to come up with a matrix to help us define what is acceptable and what's not. And then we'll have our risk rating associated with that. And then we can define the impact and obviously the likelihood of those risks. So to the right over here, I've got a sort of a impact analysis, like a risk impact and the likelihood of the risks. And this is something that I've put out from a risk assessment that we've done before with the customer. And you can sort of see here to the left here, we've got the risk likelihood, and to the top over here is our risk impact. And then we've defined, and as I said before, there's different naming conventions organizations may use. I like to using the word critical, high, medium, low, and then we're going to have like insignificant, where other companies may have something like this, like severe, major, significant, minor, insignificant, right? So depending on the nature of the organization, how they want to manage their information security and the risks associated with that. So when we start talking about our risk appetite, we come up with a way to rank the risk. So in this particular example, if we've defined that our risk is a almost certain likely to happen and it's a major incident or a major extreme scenario in this case, well then we draw the threshold and we define that as our way to rank the risk. So maybe us ranking risks is again saying, well, anything above, anything below likely, we're good. Anything above that is not good. So we can define what our appetite looks like and then how we support our risk tolerance component, which is our next part, right? So that's how we can define that. So I'm just going to clear the screen up here and we're going to talk a little bit about risk tolerance as well as our risk appetite. So anytime we define our risk tolerance, think of risk tolerance as, and I'll just put risk tolerance as sort of the abbreviated form here, is the amount of acceptable variation and values that we're going to accept that risk. So if our risk appetite again is a sort of a our risk appetite is likely, so in that sort of that medium side of things, and anything above that, well, that's good. That's our risk tolerance level. Now, if we've got certain business units that may not have sensitive data, or they're not, they're less critical than our main function of our organization, well then maybe that criticality could be a little bit, could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more. So the tolerance is basically the variance of our risk and how much we're willing to accept and how much of a variation do we allow for. So again, if we've got that appetite level of 2 or that appetite level of 3 in this example, well, we're all good. Well, in that scenario, is it a 2 or a 1? And that variance could be going down in path or it could be going up. Now, we have to be mindful that as the more we go up, we'll have to have a threshold that before it gets to this level, and we'll cover the actual capacity in just a moment. But the tolerance is just that variance in the difference. So we could accept a risk tolerance of 3, because in this case it may be 3, because we aren't too concerned with it if it's another business that's operating with less data criticality and less critical information, not opposed to our actual business needs and environment. Where maybe other areas of the business may have a higher threshold or a higher capacity. So for normal operating use, it may be a 3. For normal business use, it may be a 2. And that's our variance is a 3 and a 2 in that case. So anything above a 3 will become a significant importance, and we don't want to have that. That's where our capacity comes in. So when we talk about our capacity is the amount of loss an organization can withstand and again still continue to operate. So this is kind of like the red zone where if the risk gets to a level that the organization can't handle, it becomes to be an important factor around danger, right? It can become really important. People can lose their jobs. We can have legal issues. We can have compliance issues. Again, it's that sort of that overflow. If I've got a bucket here with all our risks and I just keep putting risk in here, well, then my capacity for that risk becomes quite hard to manage. And if we don't have a way to manage and track and obviously define and remediate against those risks, then our capacity for that risk can be quite damaging to the organization as well. So it begins to overflow, and then our risk capacity is at the point of no return. So the business could, in fact, be in a catastrophic, kind of response to that, right? They could go belly up, go out of business, become bust, and stuff like that. So we want to make sure that we don't get to that point, and then we have effective ways that we can then um, manage our capacity, right? So if our capacity, let's just say that if I just take this as an example, and then we define what our risk capacity is and the significance of issues, well, then let's just say our operating model says that our risk is a level 3, and then we can allow it to go to maybe a level 4 in the event of XYZ, and we define what that could look like. So that's our tolerance level. But then anytime, and we start operating within these means. So this is the line that we operate in, and I'll draw the green one here in just a second. So our green is good, and our risk tolerance, we can only go up to a level 4, which is okay. So that's the variance in difference. But our risk capacity, if it goes up to a level 5, then that becomes emission critical. So again, we have to define what they look like and then define how we're going to remediate. So if we have 100 issues in critical, then that's going to be a bad thing. So we need to manage our thresholds, stay between our lines, and obviously between our risk appetite. In this case, it's our risk appetite here. So let me just type in risk appetite, so which is at level 3. And then obviously our capacity in this case could be the beginning of end of level 4. So I'm going to put risk capacity would be a 4. And that's how we're going to manage and make sure that we stick in between our lanes and obviously make sure that we manage our information security risk adequately. I've also got some meanings here just for you to become familiar with some terminology as well as we continue walking through risk appetite. Um, these are things that I've pulled out from previous reports. As you can see, there's methodology here. They've got rare, unlikely, possible, likely, almost certain. And then we've got the actual impact consequences along the top here. And then we begin to threshold these risks based on, okay, if the issue is likely, possibly, like if it's possibly able to happen, how do we define that? And then we determine the impact based on that severity. And then we can go away, we can obviously do our likelihood, and then we have our impact up here. And this is our model on how we begin to, again, triage and manage our risks. And as you can see, there's another likelihood scoring metric that we can use. And this is again where organizations, in this example, we're using a 10-year variance based on their almost certain. So they'll look at the last 9 or 10 times in the past 10 years. And that's how they will also determine the criticality based on their scoring metrics based on that. So they're just some common terms and terminology that you may see different organizations have different ways of scoring and defining the metrics based on their risk appetite, the risk tolerance, and the capacity. This is just an overview of some of the terminology, some of the wording, and how some customers use the risk assessment or the risk impact and the likelihood scenario to triage and manage risks. I hope you've enjoyed this video. See you all in the next video, and thank you again for watching. Bye for now.